Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to have a little chat about a bunch of leaky, rumoured information stuff that I was sent yesterday. So, I will say straight off the bat, this is not a source I've had contact with before. This person hasn't sent me this kind of information before, but they have been completely open and transparent about why they wanted to send it to me, and also where they've got this information from. They've explained how they've come by it, and so I thought, having read through all of that, I would pass it on to you guys, essentially. So, as always, while their contact may be trustworthy, we do need to remember that this is stuff that, as of yet, we don't have any corroboration for, and so take it with as much salt as you like. I'm passing this on so we can have a chat about it. It's not gospel. It could all be true. It could also not all be true. That is the way that these things work with this kind of thing. So, stop waffling and talk about what this stuff is. First up is that the Black Templars versus Orks box is not a thing. Now, I have to admit, I'd started to suspect that myself, simply because we've already had Black Templars in Psychic Awakening, and the original information that I was sent, it definitely felt like that was the context for that conflict. Of course, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, and although I will say, in the defence of the person who sent me that information to begin with, this is the same person who sent me all the stuff about the supplements for the Space Marine Codex, the order in which they came out, what would come with them, and they proved to be correct in that stuff. They did then amend the information they'd sent to me to make it incorrect, but to be honest, it was all close enough that I'm inclined to think that they were essentially given misinformation, or they just simply didn't have all the necessary details when they were given that and then passed it on to us. And I'll also say, interestingly, that very same person sent me, along with all that stuff, a little bit of information about Age of Sigmar, which I didn't pass on because we're not really Age of Sigmar centric around here. But they mentioned that there would be a whole bunch of giant stuff for Age of Sigmar. And funnily enough, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the Warhammer community site talked about the Mortal Realms magazine, which is the same as, 40k Conquest, where you get a bunch of models per magazine, all of that stuff. And they mentioned at the very bottom of that article that there would be giant things coming to Age of Sigmar soon, with giant highlighted in bold. So it'll be very interesting to see what that turns out to be, because I suspect it might be exactly what that source told me in terms of new giants for Age of Sigmar. However, when it comes to the Black Templars versus Orks box, that looks like it was maybe not willful misinformation, but either misinterpretation or they've been told the wrong thing. Because indeed, it is going to be Space Wolves versus Orks. Not Black Templars, Space Wolves. Now, in addition to this, and this is another corroboration of that, Ghazghkull is getting a new, bigger model. Now, we've already heard quite a bit about this, but this is now yet another person who is backing that up. And, no matter how many times I read it and how many times we still don't have one, I still am inclined to believe it, because Ghazghkull is the one character, I would argue, for Orks that it makes the most sense by far to give an upgrade to. Whether this would be in the context of something like Psychic Awakening is completely... I don't know. There's no information based on that. What they've said is that it's going to be Space Wolves versus Orks, and there is going to be a new big Ghazghkull model in addition to the box. Not entirely sure if it'll be included in it, but it'll be around the same time frame, is what the implication is there. It does say in addition to, so I think that's a safe conclusion to draw there. The next bit is quite a bit bigger than that, because it is that this box is going to be the box that promotes 9th edition as well. That changes things considerably, because I would have pegged a Space Wars vs Orks box to be a continuation of a at least similar storyline to Psychic Awakening. That would make the most sense for Ghazghkull getting massive, but the information here is that it's going to be the box that promotes 9th edition. In addition to that, all the races are getting new 8.5 codices that will be compatible with 9th edition, that will be releasing next year. So 9th edition is not going to be a radical change, but more minor rule changes and additional ideas. Do not expect alternate activations or major fundamental changes in the new edition, is what they say about 9th. To be honest, I've kind of wondered how 40k would progress anyway. Whether we would see a proper 9th edition, or whether it would be something a bit more kind of incremental. The idea of kind of 8.5 codexes that work in 9th, to be honest, if there's no kind of sweeping massive changes, I don't see why that wouldn't work. And I have to admit, the new Space Marines Codex and the supplements that go with them have done that thing of feeling like a codex for a slightly different edition to the one we have now. You know, compared to all the ones we've come before, it does not have quite the same feel to it. So in that respect, I could quite easily imagine that being the first of like a series of 8.5 codexes. Of course, that's something where time will tell. It depends very much on what happens in the future as whether that turns out to be legit. Now, the next thing is something that we might see quite a bit earlier than all of the rest. They've said a closer release is going to be the new Illuminor Szeras model. So this is a Necron character. Is it 6 legs or 8 legs they've got? I think it's 6. They've got a staff called, I think, the Eldritch Lance or the Eldritch Spear, one of the two. And currently it's a 40mm Necron character. They don't have details on what it'll look like, but it is certain that it'll have a new 80mm base. So essentially, it will be a Centerpiece Necron HQ. That's interesting because they've said that that is a closer release. I'll be interested to see what form that takes, actually, because that's a significant upgrade for a character. Going from a 40mm base up to an 80mm is pretty significant. And yeah, I mean, as I said, a Centerpiece Necron HQ. Now, to be honest, of all the Necron characters, I could believe Illuminor Szeras getting that treatment more than most of the ones that we currently have. See, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Illuminor Szeras is a character that is known in the lore for essentially augmenting or building weapons, that kind of thing. So, if in terms of characters that kind of can adapt and change stuff, that would kind of make sense to me as one that would be kind of boosted up, scaled up to a much bigger base and become a centerpiece thing. So that's an interesting one. As I said, a closer release. So that might be the yardstick by which we measure kind of the accuracy of the other stuff. They have said that there is one other thing that they're not certain of. So I will say they are sure of this stuff. They are certain of this stuff. The last thing they sent was the only thing that they're not certain, which is essentially the arrival of Primaris close combat stuff. Now, that is, from what they gather, and from what they're able to find out, tied in some way to 9th edition, but that there would be separate, like, melee loadout sprues. They don't know when, just that it's sometime next year. That's all they've got. That's the bit that they're unsure of, but they are pretty sure of everything else. So, in terms of all of that, there are obviously things that are more, when I say likely, there are things that we've heard before, and there are variations on rumours that we've come across before. So, Black Templars versus Orks, that hasn't happened. That seems unlikely to happen now, because I would argue the Black Templar release window was about now. And aside from rules, they've not had anything else. It being Space Wolves versus Orks, again, is completely feasible, completely believable. I would have no reason to doubt that as being a thing, of course. Ghazghkull getting a bigger model is something that we've heard repeatedly a lot. It seems to be less a case of is it going to happen, and more a case of when is it going to happen. A big sort of release around 9th edition of Space Wolves vs. Orks with a massive Ghazghkull model, or at least a bigger Ghazghkull model. I mean, it would kick off 9th edition pretty well, should 9th edition prove to be a thing. Again, the changes to codexes, the kind of 8.5 codices, I do not disbelieve that. It seems kind of reasonable, because like I say, it really did feel like Codex Space Marines was not the same as the codexes that have come before. It felt like a different not a different approach necessarily, but it just didn't feel like, for instance, Chaos Space Marines Codex. So that's something again I can kind of believe. 9th edition is the most interesting, the biggest thing here of all of that. That's the one that's going to be, I think, the most interesting to see if we see anything else come out. Like, I would have thought that a new edition would start showing up in terms of rumours and leaks relatively soon, especially if it's due next year. But it depends on how well it's being kept under wraps. So it's interesting, but that feels like a big thing, you know. In terms of Illuminor Szeras, I've not heard anything previous to this about that, but to be honest, some new things just appear out of nowhere. There is no kind of guaranteed thing of, well, there was no leaks, so it doesn't exist. That's not the case. That doesn't happen. Of all of the Necron characters, I think I could see Szeras being the one that was scaled up as the most reasonable, the most kind of supporting. I think they've got the most like supportive background for something like that. So, but yeah, that is, as they say, the closer one. So, might well end up being the yardstick by which we consider everything else. So they have said that it seems as if Illuminor Szeras is going to be the closest of the things that they mentioned. If this proves to be correct, then hopefully they'll keep in contact with more information in the future. So, you know, they're laying it out as to what they've said. So yeah, there's a bunch of interesting stuff in there. I would be interested to hear what you guys think of all of that in the comments down below. It's obviously a lot to absorb and a lot to think about. So yeah, let me know what you think of all of that. The bits that strike you as kind of the most likely, the things that maybe you struggle with, or the things that make the most sense. So yeah, let me know what you think. And I think we'll leave it there, because it's, yeah, I think this is over to you guys now. I've passed it on. I've shared what I reckon. So yeah, it's down to you. It's going to be interesting reading the comments for this. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all of that stuff. Click it if you like. Don't click if you don't want to. And of course, there is an affiliate link for Element Games in the description. If you buy stuff from there using that link, then I get something for sending you that way. You save a bunch of money on Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, paints, all the other tabletop stuff they do. And at the end of the month, 10% of what you spend goes to charity. So you can do that if you would like. I leave it in your capable hands, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.